And welcome once again to your show, Líderes del Futuro. Today I'm going to be talking about the elections and what really happened during the elections, after the elections, and what can we expect. I decided to call this one Biden more of the same because in reality, when we talk about Biden, we are talking about an individual who is not a leftist. So he's not in the left wing or the right wing. He is always in the middle. And so one of the things that happened over the last couple of weeks, and then last week, of course, is Biden got elected to the presidency of the United States. People celebrated in the United States. Many people celebrated in the United States. And many people celebrated throughout the planet, right? With this idea that Biden is a progressive, that things are going to be okay. And what we often forget is that half of what we know and half of what we think we know is not necessarily the case, right? So in this situation, Biden is really the lesser of two evils. We had an individual that was causing a lot of trouble. And as a result of that, people are yet again settling for the lesser of two evils. Well, he's not as bad, but we are definitely not going to move over and elect Bernie Sanders. And I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes as well. And so, right during election day, we had again the president took the oath. And then that night, there were celebrations in the White House, in Washington in general. There were fireworks. A lot of people, a lot of different backgrounds were projected on the screens. The news media was doing a great job at convincing us that now we are going to be okay. And that as long as we have Joe Biden in the presidency, we shouldn't have to worry about absolutely anything. And he sounds really good when he talks. He says, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But if you take a minute or two and think about what happened in 2009, it's exactly what happened with Obama, right? When Obama came into the White House, he was elected. He was elected overwhelmingly because the previous president had put us into Iraq, in Afghanistan, had put another about $2 trillion in debt. And when it's about war, nobody says no. Nobody says anything. There are really very few protests. And now what we have is another individual that, again, there is chaos, there's an emergency, and we move quickly to elect the lesser of two evils. We elect somebody who is a centrist, and that's Biden. Biden is not on the left. Often people talk about Bernie Sanders as an individual who is all the way to the left, but Bernie is not all the way to the left. I don't personally like to use the word progressive, but if compared to Biden, Bernie is more progressive. He's more willing to have a dialogue about the fact that there should be health insurance for everybody, and so on and so forth. The left is still miles away, right? So it's important to understand Biden is more of the same because he's the guy in the middle. He doesn't upset anybody. That's why he has friends on the right and he has friends on the left. And that's why his policies get approved a lot of the time, but not all the time. And at the moment, people are so focused on the celebration that they're not necessarily paying attention to the fact that eventually some of those conservatives, Ted Cruz and friends, as I like to call them, and by the way, Ted Cruz is not all the way to the right. Ted Cruz is an individual that basically repeats what somebody needs him to repeat in order to get reelected, not necessarily because that's what he believes. And all you have to do is take a few minutes, look at some of his speeches. 1 minute he was against Trump, the next minute he was with Trump, and now he is again trying to steal the voters that Trump had for him to run for president of the United States. And again, that is not having a position. At least we know that Biden has been in the middle. He doesn't go too far to the left, too far to the right, so that people will work with him. Bernie, it's a little bit to the left. And again, he's been there for decades and he stays there. right? So we know where he stands. Unfortunately, a lot of people think Bernie is a little bit farther to the left than he actually is. And so it's important to understand, right, that people like Ted Cruz and other individuals in the next couple of weeks, in the next couple of months, will start working very hard to slowing down the work that Biden is trying to do and the work that other individuals are going to try to do in Congress. And so it's important to understand that. Now, another beautiful picture that, there have been many memes about this, and that is Bernie Sanders when he went to the inauguration. Bernie is sitting by himself. He doesn't wear a suit. He doesn't dress nicely. He doesn't dress, to try and call attention to himself. He's sitting there. He has these mittens that were made by an individual, and she gave them to him. He's wearing this jacket, and he's just sitting there paying attention to what's going on. And the reason why people have fallen in love with that picture and have made so many memes of him, from video games to anything and everything, there's even a website where you can just type the address. By going to that website, you type the address there, and suddenly that picture of Bernie shows up there. So if you want it in front of your house, you can do that. If you want it in front of anywhere, you could do that. And so the reason why people have fallen in love with this picture is really the wrong reason. The wrong reason is because of how he's dressed and he's just Bernie. But the reason why we need to pay attention to that picture of Bernie Sanders just sitting there, like, let's get this done so that I can get to the work that needs to be done, is because if we really take the time and analyze the information, the presidency has been stolen from Bernie Sanders twice. And that is, to a certain degree as well, why so many people have fallen in love with that picture. Bernie Sanders is sitting there just waiting for this to get done. But the message that he is giving is that of, I am isolated. My ideals are not respected or taken serious by this institution, which is the federal government. And, right, between Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and the Democratic Party, right, they don't want to create so much tension in the system. And because as a result of that, then donations will not come in for their own campaigns. And as a result of that, they have worked very, very well to eliminate Bernie from ever being able to become the president of the United States. The other thing that we have to pay attention to the picture of Bernie is that, again, his mannerisms, his way of dressing is also saying, although I am here and I'm not accepted as a member of this group, I, in fact, have the influence to call on my own people, right, the youth, and get them to vote for whomever I want them to vote for. I am not part of the establishment. I am my own person. And this is how I tell the world that this is who I am. And so it's important, again, for us to understand that, and keep that in mind, again, when somebody is what they call progressive, again, it's not a word I use, but it's a word that is familiar now with a lot of people, to suggest that you are trying to work for equity, that is not something that will be allowed by the Democrats or by the Republicans. And that's why I come back to that point. Biden is more of the same. He's part of the institution. The institution will allow him to work and get some things done to appease the masses, but is never going to allow him to do work that is really going to stop racial discrimination, that is really going to lead to equitable access to health and employment and some type of paycheck guaranteed for those who cannot work, right? And right now we are using all these tools because of the pandemic. But once the pandemic is no longer an emergency, millions of people will lose their housing, millions of people will lose everything they have. And then all these social services will no longer be available. Why? Because there's no emergency. And also, again, the systems of communication, we're talking about the news media, they do a great job to ignore certain individuals like Bernie and to promote certain ideals like Joe Biden's. Meaning, in the middle, we are okay. But once you move one step to the left, you've gone too far. There's this beautiful quote that says, "The oppressed is not conscious of their oppression. The framework of their subjugation is hidden. As a result, the oppressed has been allowed to be free." Meaning that they allow us to believe that we have freedom of choice and that in reality we chose Joe Biden. But for those millions of people who really wanted to vote for Bernie Sanders, their freedom of choice was taken away from them twice now, 2016 and 2020, and it was moved so that they had no other choice but to vote for Biden. And this idea of freedom is part of the reason why also we cannot get a hold of the pandemic, right? We cannot control it because people say nobody's going to force me to wear a mask and I don't have to listen to science. I can do whatever I want. And many of those individuals are now, they have passed away as a result of the disease, the virus, or, right, they may be sick today. But it is this idea, the perception of freedom. But in a lot of situations, there is actually no freedom. The framework has been created to allow you to go so far, but no more. Right? So this is very, very important. And I wanted to put it out there before it gets too far after the election and then we forget about these things. So I invite you to, again, look at that picture of Bernie Sanders, all those memes, but don't just take it as a joke. It's funny and all in all of these situations where he has been placed, right? But at the same time, let's pay attention to what happened yet again. Bernie was not given the opportunity to be voted on, and therefore millions of individuals, their so-called freedom was taken from them. Bernie is not on the left, as people like to believe, right? Because that would be socialism. And people have been manipulated to believe that socialism is not good. But in fact, if we truly lived in a capitalistic country, there would be no social services. You would have to pay for your visit to the hospital during COVID-19. And if you cannot afford it, you would just die at home. The elderly wouldn't get Social Security if we live in a capitalistic country. If you didn't save for retirement, you would just die. That's real capitalism. And individuals who, again, are low income, food stamps wouldn't necessarily be available. Your roads, you would have to pay every few miles for those roads to be paved. And there's so many other examples. So let us not believe that we live in a capitalistic society. We live in an oligarchy. While people are dying, over 400,000 people have died as of the recording of this video, which is on January 23rd, the uber wealthy, the oligarchy, has made over billion among a few of them, while people are literally starving to death. It's important that we pay attention. It's important that we get educated. And the same author, Byung-Chul Hong, says the most important thing that we can do right now is read. Read books, read philosophy, educate yourself, because the tools that have been put in front of you to give you the idea of choice, we're talking about Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok and everything else, is nothing more than subjugation through misdirection. You focus so much on those memes and everything else, and you don't see the laws that are being passed. You don't see how the wealthy and uber wealthy are getting all the money. That time when the federal government gave maybe some of you $1,200, 43,000 of the richest people in the United States got $1.7 million each, which amounted to over $70 billion, while you got $1,200. And then corporations got billions of dollars, which is why the stock market got all this money. Investors are doing good, but the regular individual who's working paycheck to paycheck, or at this moment maybe unemployed, are the ones who suffer. Yet, that they are told that if they just go and buy a ticket for Lotto and they'll win the Lotto, then they will not have to suffer. And as a result of that, often the poorest of the poor vote against their best interest when it's time to try and force the uber wealthy to pay the right amount in taxes. It is the poor that votes against them because they have been misguided to believe that someday they as well will win the lotto, they'll be wealthy, and they don't want to pay more taxes, when the chances of that are zero. My name is Rafael Vasquez. This is your show, Líderes del Futuro. You can find my podcast at Líderes del Futuro on Spotify, Google Play, and iTunes, and my website, lideresdelfuturo.org. My YouTube channel is as well Líderes del Futuro. You're going to listen to some of my radio broadcasts. I am on kbbf.org every Thursday from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And if you go to my YouTube channel, you can consider, not just liking this video, not just liking this conversation, but at the same time, signing up to get the most updated information. Thank you for your time.